With the 2024 NFL Draft upcoming, Black Coffee Talks discusses the trend on whether or not the game of football has lost its edge from previous generations. Is it better than before? Or has football gotten soft? Let's find out now on another episode of Black Coffee Talks.
This is Black Coffee Talks, where black men get together to discuss, debate, even argue about relevant topics of the day from a black man's perspective. Whether it's relationships, sports, politics, religion, nothing is off limits, nothing is out of bounds. So put your big boy pants on, grab you a cup of coffee, and let's get into some bold, dark, but unsweetened dialogue. This is Black Coffee Talks with your host, Rodney Cork. Let's get it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Black Coffee Talks. I'm your host, Rodney Cork. Here we are, we're starting a brand new football season. If you're like me, you're excited about the upcoming football season. We've already seen some great games happen, but we're in the middle of a season that is a little bit tricky. There are some rule changes that have taken place within all of football, whether it be on the high school level, the collegiate level, or the NFL level, that have made the game a little more interesting. These rule changes have seemed to take away the advantage from the defense, and there are certain rules as to how you can hit people that have the ball. From an old school standpoint like me, it has seemed to make the game a little softer than I'm used to. But we're going to talk about it today. I have with me in the studio today one of my favorite guests. He's actually my son, Randall Cork. Randall's a former collegiate football player and an avid football fan like me, and we're going to get into it today on Black Coffee Talks, and let's talk about the state of football. Good morning, Randall. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
We're glad to be here with you today. I'm so excited that you decided to come on the Black Coffee Talks podcast, where we get into bold, dark, but unsweetened dialogue. So we're going to really talk about this thing and really explore these new rule changes in the football game.
All right, well, let's get into it.
All right, before we get started, as always, our show is sponsored by 2 Cups a Day Cafe. This is Black Coffee Talks. We have our coffee, 2 Cups a Day Cafe, located right inside the P30 workspace on 30th and Post Road. You need to come and check out the delicious coffees, drinks, and lattes they have. 2 Cups a Day Cafe. They're one of the sponsors of the Black Coffee Talks podcast, and we're glad to have them. So, Randall, let's drink our coffee, and let's get into it. All right, so here we are. How did we get here? The football season has started. We've already seen some incredible games on the collegiate level, the NFL level, but we've also seen some significant injuries that have taken place early in the year. Aaron Rodgers ruptured his Achilles the first series of the first game that he played in. We saw Nick Chubb get his knee just totally twisted the wrong way. We've seen college hits. The young boy from Colorado, Travis Hunter, got his liver lacerated on what looked to be a dirty hit to me. But here we have all these different rule changes, but we still have a lot of injuries. What do you think about the state of football right now?
I think we're getting to a decent place. Of course, football is a very contact sport. There's no way around it. Injuries are a part of the game. Mm-hmm. But I think that the new rule changes have gotten to a place where it limits the life-altering injuries as opposed to the knee injuries or things you may end up with a limp or different things like that. But ultimately, it takes out those life-altering things if you're getting hit in the head and, people will diagnose with CTE and life-changing things where they can't really function later on in life. I think that that's taken out of the game as much as possible.
Okay, I get that, and I'm all for safety. I'm a proponent of let's do things to make it as safe as possible. But like you said, football is it's not a contact sport. It's a collision sport.
Right.
You literally run head first into somebody trying to knock them down. And you know the inherent risk when you go, you're a former football player, you know when you play football, there is a risk of getting injury. But we're at a point right now where you pretty much got to ask permission to hit the quarterback there. You got to, be careful of how you wrap people up and lay them gently down to the ground. From an old school perspective like me, that's just not football. I mean, we might as well play flag football. What do you think about it?
I mean, sometimes it does seem like they got to wrap them up and lay them on a bed, and to be safe for the quarterback. But again, I really do think that it does take some of those life-altering injuries away. It does do that. Ultimately, it is football, and you want to see the big hits and the big collisions. But it takes a lot of those things where people, the stars of the game that I grew up watching, that you grew up watching, that we really don't hear from anymore because of those collisions, that we really didn't see the rule changes and affect them because of those today.
I get that, but I mean, I'm a fan. I like turning on the TV every day, and I want to see the big hits. That's what you go for. I grew up watching 70s football where they was literally knocking brothers out. I mean, unless you had to call a detective in for murder, there wasn't no flag on it there. You hit somebody. Now, I remember watching the game, even on the offensive side of the ball, Earl Campbell's playing against the Raiders there, and the cornerback for the Raiders came up, and I mean, hit Earl dead in the chin. It was just a boom. And both players got knocked out, but Earl Campbell still fell into the end zone to score the touchdown. That's the kind of stuff and the memories that are etched in my head. I'm a huge 49er fan. I remember Ronnie Lott just knocking people out there. Those are the things that endear fans to the game. Now, I know that's kind of barbaric, and I know there are people that had serious injuries. I actually was watching the game when Darryl Stingley got paralyzed there from the neck down. I was watching the game when Lawrence Taylor hit Joe Theismann there and broke his leg there. I was watching those kind of things. I've seen that, and we don't like those horrific injuries. But as a football player, now here's where I want to go with this. You're a former football player. You played both sides of the ball in high school, college. You played receiver. I remember, and I can go back and pull up the film if you want to deny, one of your favorite things to do as a receiver was to crush somebody on a crackback block where they didn't see it coming and you cleared them out. And you were good at that. Can't do that anymore. Does that take away from the game? Would you even want to play receiver now?
I mean, there's different aspects of the game of football at receiver than that, but that was one of my favorite parts of the game. Of course, you want to be, hitting the guy and energize the sideline of, you see him hit a guy and knock his feet up in the air, going like that. But ultimately, there are some things that really bother me. That's just a part of football. Mm-hmm. If a ball carrier's coming and you don't want your teammate to get tackled, you got to stop him somehow. But, now you kind of have to set an offensive screen or, basketball like pick, to not let him get to the ball carrier. That kind of takes away from that aspect. But, I get it from necessarily the head and neck injuries, but it does take a little bit away from that head-on collision and that football aspect that we look to see.
Okay, well, looking back on it, I said you played all the way through high school, played in college there. Do you see any long-term effects, or do you have any injuries or lingering pain that you're dealing with now that you could relate to football?
Of course. There's several things. Knees don't quite feel the same. Finger joints don't quite feel the same by catching so many balls, hips and stuff. It's definitely, and I'm recently out of football, so the longer and longer I keep going, the Lord allow, it might get worse. I've seen some of my teammates who've already had to have hip replacements and things because of some of the injuries and stuff that they've gone through. But that's a part of it. And no matter how much you try and change the rules or anything, that's just a part of collision. Two grown men running full speed into each other. That's just a part of it and what you sign up for. But ultimately, yeah.
Okay. So do you see long-term, where do you see the game going long-term there? Is it going to get progressive? Are there going to be more rule changes? Do you think it's going to get more and more difficult for a defensive player there to tackle somebody? Or do you think they've hit the right place right now?
I think they've hit the right place where they are now. It's not much really you can do without taking it from a full-on collision to two-hand touch. But I think that there are some other things like the field surfaces that need to be changed about the non-contact injuries with the field turf or grass, those aspects. But as far as the collision contact things, there's only so much you can do because as a defender, you're running full speed trying to tackle the guy that's going to the ground. You don't see where he's dropping his head because he's going to the ground and you just trying to hit him to make a play on the ball. Some things just ultimately happen. So I think that we're at a place where we're getting to where the game is eventually going to stop these rule changes.
Okay. You're watching the Black Coffee Talks podcast, Black men engaging in bold, dark, but unsweetened dialogue. I'm your host, Rodney Cork. I'm here with former college football player Randall Cork, my actual son. So we're talking about the state of football today. Randall, let me ask you one other thing right now. So you said you do see that there is some good to these rule changes, making the overall game a little safer. But do you think it takes away from the excitement of the game at all? particularly from a fan standpoint.
Absolutely, those big collisions that get the crowd going, get the teammates going. Yeah, those are taken out of the game, but there still are those ways that you see a lot more hurdling going on. You see a lot more actual using the right terms and the correct way of form tackling that going on. So it's more of being able to extend to the youth to actually see this is the correct way to tackle rather than just going on and just running full speed and just bumping and not wrapping up. That we get so excited of you see a defender coming and they get hit, but they don't wrap up and the offensive player keeps going. So you ultimately get those changes where it makes it for a better team. The defense players get better. Offensive players understand how to avoid those different things.
Okay, now, but tell me this there. As a former defensive back, you're playing the game today with the rules the way they are there. But you're coming down from the safety position. You see a receiver stretched out, just about to catch the ball, everything there. You got the perfect angle on him there. You had shoulders, or you're running full speed. Do you, in the heat of that moment, I mean, it's a split second, the heat of that moment, do you have the wherewithal to say, nope, I can't hit him like that. Let me turn to the side. Let me move my head. Let me make sure I don't hurt it. Are you thinking like that as a defensive player?
I think you're changing your aiming point. So at the beginning when I was playing, I think you're aiming more towards the chest and neck area to really get that knockout shot. But now you're kind of aiming towards the midsection, a little bit lower to kind of do that. And that's what I was talking about earlier. If the receiver or offensive player makes an adjustment of they duck their head a little bit or doing those different things, that's what you can't really adjust for. And those are things that do those different things. But in the heat of the battle, you're just really trying to get him to the ground and trying to get, break up the play as best as possible. So you're not really thinking about, I'm not really trying to hit this guy in the head or shoulders. I'm just trying to get him to the ground as best as possible.
But go back, and I can't remember the defensive player's name, but it was a couple years ago in the playoffs, NFL playoffs, the Vikings were playing the Saints, and it was the last play of the game. Threw the ball to the receiver on the Vikings. The Saints safety came, had a perfect angle on, but he slowed up somehow. He tried to soften the hit, and he ended up missing the tackle, and the guy went on, scored the touchdown, and the Vikings won the game. Now, had he just went with his normal motion and blasted, I think it was Stephon Diggs with the receiver time, blasted him, game would have been over. But he tried to adjust, tried to make a calmer, nicer tackler, and he ended up being the GOAT, and they lost the game. How do you make that split-second decision in the heat of battle?
I think you're giving him a little bit more grace than what he deserves.
Oh, okay. You think
just
blown coverage?
He just blew coverage and missed that. But it is hard to make that decision in the live thing. But I think you just have to go and one of the things that we were taught, if you're gonna make a mistake, make it full speed. So just keep going and keep playing, and go for it. And if you get penalized or anything like that, you're not trying to intentionally hurt the guy. You're not trying to end his career or whatever. But you just got to play football and ultimately make a play.
So there it is. That's the thing I want to get at. Everything there. There's an understanding amongst the players that we're gonna play hard. It's gonna be physical. I'm gonna hit you as hard as I can. You're gonna hit, but we understand that's just part of the game, everything there. And injuries are going to happen sometime within that context there. But as a player, especially as a former player there, you go into the game with that mindset, knowing this guy personally is not trying to kill me, but there's just an understanding we're going to play hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime that I've gotten hit by a guy, unless it's maybe in practice, there might be a little personal thing that we've gotten into a little beef before or whatever. But there's never a point where, I'm really trying to injure somebody or really feel like somebody's really trying to injure me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I've seen you take some injuries. I saw you take a couple hits where you had to lay on the field, tore your hamstring, got your bell rocked or anything. How do you feel? Is there personal animosity towards that player? I'm going to get him the next time I get back in? Or is that just part of the game?
I mean, of course, that's your competitive nature coming out. If you get hit, next play, I'm looking for him trying to do. I mean, I remember there was a time I caught a pass against, we were playing Ritter in high school, and I got rocked right afterwards. I didn't, feel anything, any effects to it. But later in the game, I was looking for him. I was looking for, a way to, get him back for that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's perfectly okay. But the thing is, I'm not trying to injure him or, take something back on him that way.
Okay. So if you played today, would you rather play the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball?
Offensive for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why so?
With the rule changes and everything, I mean, receivers really can't get touched. We running out there free, and I just love catching the ball and trying to run and avoid different offenders score touchdowns. But it is something fun about playing safety, coming downhill and helping support the run, or seeing a receiver come across the middle and making that statement, "Don't come across here," and you might get alligator arms trying to catch the ball, knowing I'm here. But I still would love to play the offensive side of the ball.
Okay, we're going to get deeper into that there, but let's take a commercial break before we get into the second segment of our show. I want you to understand today's show is brought to you by Besiaki Vision, a leader in cinematic storytelling. With a commitment to innovation, Besiaki Vision is dedicated to providing quality products and services that meet the needs of their customers. As a corporate sponsor of this podcast, Besiaki Vision is proud to support the mission of the Black Coffee Talks podcast to promote healthy dialogue among Black men. Besiaki Vision has a mission to work with good people, tell good stories, but through our vision. At the Black Coffee Talks podcast, we understand the importance of teamwork and collaboration. That's why we are proud to partner with Besiaki Vision and support their efforts in cinematic storytelling. To learn more about Besiaki Vision, please visit their website at www.besiakevision.com. That's www.besiakivision.com. Again, you're watching the Black Coffee Talks podcast. I'm your host, Rodney Cork. I'm here with my guest, Randall Cork, my son, who's a former collegiate football player, and we're talking about the state of football today. Randall, we got into right before the break talking about whether you'd like to play offense or defense in today's game. I know in high school you played both ways. In college, you were primarily focused on receiver. But here's the thing I want to get into today. Because of these rule changes, is there an advantage that the offense has over the defense in today's game? What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, you have guys on the offensive side of the ball that can run around free, do whatever they want to do. We just saw on Monday night, just a couple of days ago, player for the New York Giants, Kayvon Thibodeau, got penalized for, as he was a wall defender, he can't let anybody inside of him. He pushed George Kittle past 5 yards, past the 5 yard 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, which is illegal. But that's just football. He's just doing his job, but he got penalized for it, and ultimately they ended up scoring a touchdown from it. So, things like that encourage the offensive players to do whatever they can to catch the ball and get open, which is kind of a hindrance for the defense to allow them to stop them.
So if the offense has a distinct advantage because the rule change, how does this make the game better? I don't see how that makes the game. In fact, we're seeing more points scored than ever before. But, as a fan, I guess that's what a lot of people like to see. But I like to see the battle. I like to see the scrum, the line of scrimmage, the banging. I like to see big hits there on both sides because offensive players can be aggressive as well, too. But it seems like we're just giving all the advantage to the offense right now.
It's definitely, it just makes you be a better athlete. You can't be so handsy with the receivers and things, but you just got to be better with your footwork. So I think as the game has evolved, so does the players have to evolve. You have to not be so physical at the line of scrimmage, but ultimately adjust with your feet and be, quicker and more agile that way.
Okay. Now, one of the things I know you have some aspirations to maybe get in coaching, particularly you've got a son now coming up, everything there. How would that affect you teach? Now, I'm old school. I grew up with old school coaches, and they was like, you hit. If you get hurt, rub some dirt on it, get right back in there. You don't ever show no weaknesses there. You do everything you can, get off this field. You're not going to be hurt out there, lay around like you're hurt. I know it's a kinder, gentler time right now, and so we don't necessarily teach that. Or maybe so. Are you more old school approach or more new school approach with it there?
Don't get me wrong. This is still the game of football. So, there is that aspect of, you get hit, you got to get up, rub some dirt on it, you be all right. But there are some of the rule changes as, you have to teach. So instead of being just this, imposing where you can't really move, now we're going to have to do some agility drills to be able to cover as far as be able to come downhill and make a play tackling the guy. So it's just a different different way of teaching the positions and going, rather than just saying, okay, we're good and it's more physical, but you also got to play in space and be able to defend people that
So,
way.
I mean, I just see the game totally changing. I mean, we were talking before we went on here. I saw a high school game yesterday where the score was 74-67. So obviously there was no defense going on in that game at all there. Everybody's just running up and down the field. And I'm thinking, as a parent, if I was sitting in the stands watching that, that would be just irritating me, because there's no real, I mean, obviously some team won and one team lost, so there was competition, but just to see touchdown after touchdown after touchdown and nobody stopping each other, obviously, you know, there's been an effect on the game because of this, and I really just think it's taken away from the game. I don't watch football as adamant as I did before, unless there are teams I'm really, really interested in. Today, you know, we've got a full college slate of games today, and I'm a pick and choose which games I want to watch that I have interest in, which I did anyway. But just because of the nature of football and the excitement of football, if I'm scanning through the channels and I just see some football and I see a big hit, I'll stay and watch it for a little while, even if I don't even know who's on the teams or anything. It's just that excitement of football. I don't feel that anymore with these new rules, everything.
Okay. I mean, it's those still plays are still there, and I think that there's still opportunity for, you know, fans of the old school way of, you know, still get involved. Just the other day, I've seen highlights. I think of which I kind of enjoyed a little bit. It was Butler. They were playing somebody earlier in the season, and the guy came downhill running the ball, running back, and ran him over. So I mean, you know, there's still those plays that happen. There's still the plays that come along, and, you know, somebody makes a good tackle, throw a nice little shoulder into their chest as opposed to in their head, or using their head as a spear. You know, those plays still happen. But it's just a way of thinking, you know, I'm not going to lead with my head as a spear and, you know, try and do that, which can ultimately injure me and mess up my neck and different things, or injure that person and they can't play, you know, because it takes away. Now, unfortunately, because the hit against Travis Hunter, now you're missing the game of being able to see him against top competition as they're getting ready to play against Oregon or USC. So it takes away from that fanfare. Not as many people may be interested because he's not playing. So now you don't have your star player to be able to promote those different games.
Good point, because there's a give and take there. I mean, yeah, you're taking some star players out of the game. Here's the bottom line, it's about money. And so if you don't have the top key players on the field, people aren't watching. That means the TV executives are losing money, the team is losing money, the concessions, all that, everybody's losing money. So I understand the business side of it, why it's more to their advantage to keep these offensive players on the field. You know, the Jets are kicking themselves. Aaron Rodgers is gone after the first game, not even the first series of the first game. And so, you know, their fan viewership went from way up here and it just crashed in just a matter of moments there. And so I understand why they want to keep the high-profile athletes on the field, but it just seems unfair that you're penalizing the defense for a game that's been going on for years and years and years, and making, you know, changes that seem to really just be taken away from the whole, you know, way the game is played. I just don't. I don't like it. I mean, I'm all for safety. You know, it's horrible to see, you know, the players that are suffering with CTE from long exposure to hit after hit after hit. Like I said, the joint injuries and different things. But at the same time, it was an inherent risk that you knew of when you went and you signed up to play the game, everything there. And so, you know, from a fan standpoint, I'm upset. From a humanity standpoint, I understand it there, but I want to see them big hits, man. I like those big hits there, man. That's just the way I was brought up there. Again, I'm a child of the '70s, so back in the day, they were knocking people out back in them days. You know, I modeled myself after Lawrence Taylor when I was a little kid. There, I wanted to wear 56, and I wanted to be Lawrence. Lawrence Taylor was a beast, man, just absolute beast, you know. But can't do that anymore. And you have, you know, they're actually, this we could get off subject, but I got to get it. They are actually comparing and trying to say that this kid with the Cowboys, Parsons, who is great, he's a great player, but they're trying to say he's as good as Lawrence Taylor. Ain't no way in hell he's as good. I grew up watching 56, and 56, Lawrence Taylor was just another kind of human. Michael Parsons good, but he ain't on that level. You know, tell me what you think about that there.
I mean, we just had a conversation outside of even with the basketball realm, but and I'll get to that in a second. But I think it's more generational. Now, I grew up, I didn't really get to see Lawrence Taylor play in person, what I remember. But I've seen highlights and I've seen his greatness and be able to see what he can do. Now I see Michael Parsons, and the guy is just virtually unstoppable. He's very good. I don't know if he's the greatest of all time level yet, but he might get there one day. But to my point earlier, I think it's generational for when we're talking about basketball as well. When you get into conversation of who's the greatest of all time, Michael Jordan, LeBron, or Kobe, for me, I'll argue up and down it's Kobe Bryant because I grew up with Kobe Bryant and necessarily got to see him. And
that's another show.
Things.
We got a whole show dedicated to that coming up. Everything there, but I get what you're saying. I get to say it's generational. So people that didn't get to see Lawrence Taylor, they don't realize the greatness that they missed. I watched him week after week after weekend. He did. I remember when he was in college, his last game in college. I mean, he did everything. He scored touchdowns. He made sacks. He may have even ran a kickoff back there. I mean, he did everything you could do on the field. I've seen two incredible performances in football. It was him playing in North Carolina his final game, and then I went to Purdue University at the same time. Rod Woodson was there, and I tell you, that was just the most incredible athlete I've ever seen on the football field. I remember his last game, the Oak and Bucket game, was Purdue against IU. And he did. He literally ran a punt back for a touchdown. He ran an interception back for a touchdown. He caught a pass. He just did everything there. He literally dominated that game with one person. But back to the subject that we're talking about here, the hits of the game, safety of football, the new rules of football. This is Black Coffee Talks podcast. I'm Rodney Cork. I'm here with my guest, Randall Cork, and we're talking about the state of football today with these new rule changes. Here's the one I want to get to today, Randall, with the new rule changes and the way things are going right now. We said football is a collision sport, and it's still a collision sport. Knowing what you know now, and as a father, would you let your son play football going forward?
Absolutely. I think for me, there's a waiting period that I would like to be. I didn't get to play organized football until I was in about the 7th grade for various different reasons. But I think around that time is when I would feel comfortable putting my son to be able to play contact football. Definitely get him into flag football to understand the points of the game. When you're at a younger age, it gets to that you're just running into each other, not really understanding how to tackle, how to run, how to avoid different, major contact, and that can really set you up to develop bad habits in the future. So getting him involved of understanding the game from where he's not worrying about having to get knocked out or running around and, keep your head on a swivel, as they used to say. You're worrying about actually having to learn the technicalities and how to actually play the positions that you're actually playing with flag football and doing different things.
Okay. Well, Randall, I thank you so much for coming on today here. We're going to get the final thought. I want to get your final thoughts on this here. The state of football today, the way it is, rule changes, all of that. Is the game better, the game worse, or is it still the greatest game ever invented there? What's your thoughts on it?
At the end of it, the game is still the greatest game ever created. Okay. I do think some of the new rule changes have affected and made the game a better place, so it makes it safer to avoid those different head injuries. But ultimately, it is still the game of football. You still run the risk of getting injured, but it's made it a better place and be able to still be the greatest game ever created.
All right. Well, Randall, thank you so much for coming on the Black Coffee Talks podcast today. I appreciate all your input and thought. I'm going to come back after this commercial break with what we call the last drop, where I'll give my take on the topic today, and then we'll call it a day. Once again, the Black Coffee Talks podcast is sponsored by Besiaki Vision. Besiaki Vision is a leader in cinematic storytelling with a commitment to innovation. Besiaki Vision is dedicated to providing quality product and services that meet the needs of their customers. As a corporate sponsor of this podcast, Besiaki Vision is proud to support the mission of Black Coffee Talks podcast, where we promote healthy dialogue among Black men. Besiaki Vision has a mission to work with good people, telling good stories, but through our vision. At the Black Coffee Talks podcast, we understand the importance of teamwork and collaboration. That's why we are proud to partner with Besiaki Vision and support their efforts in cinematic storytelling. To learn more about Besiaki Vision, please visit their website, www.besiakevision.com. That's www.besiakevision.com. And so now we get to what I call the last drop of coffee. And while I thank my guests for coming on and talk about the state of football, here is my overall point of it there. I think football is getting watered down. I really do. We're seeing games where scoring seems to be at just a premium. We're seeing higher scoring games, which I understand makes for an exciting television product, but I feel it diminishes from the game itself. Football is a game of struggle. It's a game of might and will where two teams are trying to impose their will on each other, and one of them is going to get the advantage. In order for that to be a true, fair demonstration of will versus skill, you're going to have to allow hitting on both sides of the ball. Right now, you can't touch the quarterback. You can't hit him in the head. You can't hit him low. You pretty much got to raise your hand and ask permission, can we sack the quarterback? While I understand quarterbacks are a key component of the game, they're the highest paid players. They're the ones that people come pay their money to see. And so there's an effort to protect them. I understand that. But for the fan that has a team base that they stand behind, from a fan that really just like to see overall good competition of football, you've got to lessen the reins. You've got to let these teams go after each other. Yes, there needs to be new technique, talking the way that you hit, the positioning of your targeting, and everything like that, so you can somewhat protect players, particularly key players and quarterbacks, but you've got to take the reins off the defense and allow them to be aggressive, allow them to actually defend their portion on the field and go after these players. And in that, you're going to have some injuries. In that, you're going to have some collisions, and we pray to God you don't have any devastating, life-altering injuries. But understand, as a football player, you understand that going into it, you sign up for it. We just pray to God that nothing bad happens. But we've got to find a way to continue to let the game be played the way it was meant to be played, to let it be aggressive, to let it be exciting, but it's still the same way, make some innovations to the techniques to protect the players. I believe football is God's game. It's the greatest game ever created. I'll watch it regardless of what the rules say, but I really want to see those hits come back, and let's go out and play some football. I'm ready for some football. I can't wait to see the games that are scheduled today and the rest of the season. So we're going to finish our coffee, then we're going to go get into these games today. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Black Coffee Talks podcast, where black men engage in bold, dark, but unsweetened dialogue. I'm your host, Rodney Cork. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode of Black Coffee Talks podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Until the next time, may God bless you and may God keep you. You take care. This is Black Coffee Talks.